And she's faced with a vote. She's faced with voting on more money for the war in Iraq. And Carol Porter thinks, well, I only got in by the skin of my teeth, and I've got another race in 4 years down the road, and those grandmothers are getting old, and maybe I should try to make friends with Pelosi and Rahm Emanuel. And she votes for that supplemental bill for Iraq. So what did we learn in 2006 is we have to have our own party, we have to run our own elections, and we have to run our own candidates. Candidates who are accountable to us. Now, some of that may sound like a little, well, we might have to reconfigure the Constitution, or we might have to reconfigure the way we do elections. Thomas Jefferson would be all right with all of that. Thomas Jefferson, in fact, said that to rebel is good. He said, in fact, that if a rebellion doesn't happen once every 20 years, something is seriously wrong with any country. And I want to tell you about a guy called Daniel Shays. Daniel Shay, actually. Anybody heard of Daniel Shay? Yes. All right. He was a soldier, came home from the Revolutionary War. This was 1786. And he was in debt, and he wasn't getting the benefits he was promised, and he wasn't getting the health care he needed, and he got into more debt. And suddenly the government, in this case the government of Massachusetts, passed a law that the government could come and seize his property if he hadn't paid all his taxes and paid all his debts. And Daniel Shays said, "What? I just fought for you guys. We just fought for a revolution. We just fought to throw off tyranny. You're going to take my land because I'm in debt because I fought that war?" And Daniel Shays had a lot of friends who also had just fought that war. And so we had in 1786 what was called the Shays Rebellion. And you may not have learned about it in school. It's because most of the school curricula are written by the same people that focus on Marion Jones and ignore Alberto Gonzalez. But the Shays Rebellion featured hundreds of former soldiers, hundreds of farmers, hundreds of taxpayers from the lowest ranks of New England society. 10 years after the Revolution, 10 years after the uprising, the war against the British, they started a war against their own tax authorities, their own governments, and they camped out outside the courthouses, and Howard Zinn describes them parading with their cannon and their fifes and their drums outside the courts. And the courts made a few changes about who could be taxed for what and how much property could be changed, how much property could be taken. But then they wrote a constitution that tried to put a cap on most of that, to protect property and give people the right to protect property from